First things first, Sam, how are you today?
Doing pretty good. I found a really great coffee shop. Got some new beans in Montreal, one of my favorite cities in the world.
Okay.
So all things considered, doing okay.
That sounds good. How is the tour going?
It's good. It's good. It's always getting your sea legs. For the first like couple weeks. It's funny. We did such a long run in Europe, but that was such a strange thing because not only were we doing it without my brother because he had to stay home for a family emergency, so it's just three of us instead of four of
Mm,
us, but also the album wasn't out yet, so we were only just starting to sort of incorporate some of the new stuff. So the last like week and a half, 2 weeks has been we're playing a lot of the new stuff on the record, and it always takes a little bit of getting used to it, and especially with a record like this. Our shows, we're so used to playing these really having the energy just be like high, 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 high the entire time. And
sure.
this record is not a really high energy record. Um, the songs are more dynamic and intentional, thought provoking, and emotional songs. So it's
Mm.
it's been it's been interesting to try and incorporate them into the set and figure out how that feels in our bodies. It's a an adjustment period, but I mean, I'm really excited to be playing all this new stuff live because I really really love this record so much, and I'm happy to be out on the road supporting it.
That's awesome to hear. And as you mentioned, it's a very personal record. It kind of details some of the things about growing up and your life and things of that nature. So, was it important to you that, as you mentioned, it is somewhat of a thematic departure from earlier work? Was it important to you that it resonated with people and that you now get that confirmation in the sense that, oh, people can see something in this story?
Well, that's a loaded question because I don't know, like I think I've spent so much time hoping and praying that people will somehow connect to the music that I make,
Hmm.
to a point where it becomes like an unhealthy
Okay.
preoccupation, I think. Um, and on this record, I was more focused on what is something that feels truthful, what is something that feels good to me, um, and what's something. I took a bit more of a selfish approach, I think, of
Hmm.
what's in my heart and on my mind that I would like to explore on this record, and starting from there and hoping that if I push myself to uncomfortable places, and if I dig deep, then in witnessing that kind of exploration, our audience will connect with it.
Hmm.
But that's a big leap of faith, but I think a leap of faith that you just need to take as an artist, and one that I'm learning to take more and more.
No, but this is very interesting because I did read another interview that you did, maybe it was years ago, but I don't really remember. But where you mentioned this part of challenging yourself and not being complacent and kind of going outside of your comfort zone. And this might sound as a silly question, but as a creative, why is it important to do that? Why is it important to challenge yourself and go out of your comfort zone?
Well, I mean, I can only speak for myself. I feel like if I'm not doing something that makes me uncomfortable, I'm not doing something worthwhile. I'm not seeking that kind of or well, that is at the core of any art that I think is really, really good. Um, personally, like
Sure.
I think that the stuff that I connect to often, like outside of the stuff that I make, is I'll watch a comedian, do a stand-up routine, and if they say something that is just so like deeply vulnerable and cringy, I love that because it's usually something that you've thought yourself, a secret thought, and that you feel so alone and isolated in thinking, and then somebody says it out loud, and you're like, holy shit, I'm not
Sure.
alone, you know. And that's by getting outside your comfort zone, that's generally what happens. And look, sometimes also you get outside your comfort zone and you're faced with just kind of like head scratches, and that's fine too. I would rather be the odd one out,
Mm,
in that situation, than be the one who just didn't say anything or didn't try to push themselves to a who didn't try to push themselves.
sure. Now there are a lot of themes on this album, and as I mentioned, the reason I asked that question about kind of it resonating with people, I think I'm of a similar age of you, and a lot of these themes I recognize because I just moved back to my hometown after being away for about
Oh
18 years.
wow. Wow. Congrats.
Yeah, and I always had that line in my head when I was younger, that Bruce Springsteen line from Thunder Road, "It's a town full of losers, and I'm pulling out of here to win." And
Yeah.
I assume you had a similar thing as you were kind of a young adolescent, kind of wanting to bust out of where you were?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely resonated with that too, as I'm sure so many of us,
Sure.
who grew up in small towns did. But I think that coming back to it now, I it's I think back on that kid and that desire that she had, that I had, and I can smile at it a little bit, and because I think a big part of it was me thinking that if I got out of my hometown, I would be able to shake some of the feelings that I had growing up in that hometown. And the truth is, I don't think I ever will. I'm
Mm,
never going to get that chip off my shoulder. I will always have that chip on my shoulder. I will always feel in some way like I'm, a little fish in a big pond, um, and fighting for recognition, for a voice of my own, for a voice that matters, um, and fighting to not be forgotten or to fade away into the background. That's why I'm out here in Montreal on tour with a rock band, that I'm the lead singer of. That's just a part of my psyche, um, and that's so tied in with where I'm from. I love upstate New York. I love Ithaca,
okay.
um, and I love being a townie. I love being an upstate New Yorker. My mother grew up in upstate New York. My grandfather worked at the Kodak building in Rochester. She lived there her whole life. I lived there for most of my young life. Um, the people that raised me, the people that I was around, the people that picked me up and beat me up, and like everything in between. Those
Sure.
those people matter so much to me, um, and I wanted to make a record that honored that, and didn't try to dwell. I mean, I guess there are a lot of songs that do talk about that feeling of being trapped, of wanting to escape. But I also hope that on this record there are some moments of clarity, that I felt making it, where I was able to really appreciate the place where I'm from, and know that I'm never gonna really leave there in my heart.
Sure. And
I
I
mean,
think
Bruce Springsteen bought a house in like right adjacent to the town that he grew up in, you know, so he never really left either.
but so for instance, a song like Your Town then, which is kind of where you, well, you don't forget where you come from. You kind of mentioned that. And then Doug Peterson, if I'm not, Todd Peterson, sorry. He was one of those people, I suppose, who had a big impact on you as when in your younger years. And you can hear that in his message, just the kindness at the end of
Yeah.
the song. So what was it about him that yeah, that helped you grow when you were in upstate New York?
Well, you know, Todd, he really pushed me. He kind of instilled in me this work ethic in the arts that I didn't really find in many other places
Mm,
in my own town. You know, I whenever we would be drilling choreography for, you know, for a musical, because he did all the choreography for all the musical theater stuff that I did as a kid. He, you know, we'd do it again and again and again, and he wouldn't give me an inch. You know, like if
mm,
I fucked up, I had to do it again and again and again and again. And that kind of work ethic, really like was just something that he ingrained in my psyche. Um, and beyond that, he also just simply he had this confidence in all of us, not just in me, in all of the kids that he worked with. You know, where if you ever had a moment of saying like, I don't know, I just can't do it, he would say, "What are you talking about? Of course you can. Of course you can. I mean, are you crazy? Of course you can do this." Um, and I think that was so valuable in an educator, in a friend, in a mentor.
sure.
And I really, I've said this a lot, but I really don't think that I would be here if not for him, and for, you know, for other mentors like him that I've had along the way who, you know, who had believed in me and encouraged me. Um, it that that little bit of external validation goes such a long way, especially when you're a young person. Not only, you know, was Todd there for me, I remember this guy Chris Mazer, who worked at a music store in my
Mm,
hometown, and I was, you know, I was the kid who would always come in after school and like ask to play around with all the guitar pedals and ask him questions about the recording equipment. And he was so sweet and indulgent. And he had worked at a studio in New York called Electric Ladyland. And I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. You know, it's Jimi Hendrix's studio. He
mm,
lived in New York. And I remember right before I left for college, we had made a demo, my high school band, and I had made a demo. And I gave it to him. I played it for him, and I asked him what he thought, and he was like, "It's great, man." And I was like, "Do you think, you know, we're thinking about maybe moving to New York and like trying to be a band in New York?" And he's like, "I think you guys would be great in New York." And that's it. That's all he said. But that little bit of encouragement was all I needed. That little bit of validation was all I needed.
I think that's as you mentioned, those little comments, and they can come very sparsely, but they are so invaluable in instilling a certain confidence or belief in oneself,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah.
It's beautiful to hear. Well, there was something else. There's a line because you mentioned kind of everything that happened and having this notion of, okay, I want to prove myself in a sense. Um, in Start a Band, you mentioned a 10-year plan. Now, obviously, this is a song, and I don't know if you actually had a 10-year plan. But if you look back now, that you've been doing it for a little bit over that. But has it been like you envisioned it in a way, that being in a
No,
touring band?
no.
Okay.
Yes, yes, and no. I mean, it's you know, like the things when the things happen that you dream of happening, when yeah, when they actually happen to you,
Mm,
it's very surreal. Um, when we played the State Theater and sold it out for the first time in my hometown. That felt very surreal. I wasn't able to really comprehend it when
Mm,
we saw that Red Rocks. I wasn't able to really comprehend it. My mind was
sure.
just so busy with so many other things. I was so preoccupied, with a million other things that were going on. Like when you find out that your song is the number one song on alternative radio, I remember hearing that and being excited, and then the excitement just kind of like felt. Then I felt kind of numb and empty. Right? It's
Right.
a very weird thing. Being out on the road is not what you think. It's a lot of just like sitting around and
Sure.
finding ways to occupy yourself, and um, a lot of learning about how cars work. Because you're in a van most of the time that's breaking down, and you learn about suspension and injector fluid and what highways you can drive your trailer on and which ones you can't, like that kind of stuff. It's not ever how you picture, but that's just life, right?
Sure.
I'm glad that it's not how I pictured it, because that would be boring.
Yeah, makes sense. I want to get to kind of the musical or the sonic landscape of the album a little bit because you kind of alluded to it earlier. But it isn't the same sonic landscape. It is a little bit more sparse. It is a little bit more. The way I kind of wrote it down for myself is you get to sit in the emotion a little bit more. You get to sit there and just feel it and listen to it. And for you playing live as well, and I saw you play some kind of acoustic type sessions where it's basically just you and the guitar.
Yeah.
What has that been like for you, where people can hear you very clearly? It's not muddled by all the music around it, but people can really listen to the story. What has that transition been like for you?
It's been really revelatory. It's been really cool. I think that I'm still trying to figure out how to do it. I was doing a lot of solo shows last year,
Mm,
just me and an acoustic guitar supporting my solo record. And in that, I was also testing out some of this new material with the band. But playing these songs with the band is still, I'm still adjusting to it,
mm,
because like I'm so used to having this wall of sound behind me supporting me the entire time, and now it's a balance of like, okay, when do we quiet down, and when do I'm also on in-ear monitors, so it's like
mm.
very different than playing these solo acoustic shows where I'm just like it's fully naked, and I'm not.
Right.
I just have wedges in front of me. Little technical things like that sound like they don't matter, but they do kind of make a big difference. So I'm still trying to figure out that balance. But I do love it. I think that I've been craving something like this that's a bit more naked. It's a bit more stripped down. It feels like a bit more raw. Um, and I think this album um, couldn't have been done any other way. If you had put a big wall of sound behind it, it wouldn't have had the same impact. So
Mm.
I think that we're still kind of figuring out how to do it live as a band. But I think we'll get there. And in the meantime, it's a fun challenge to figure out how to make it work.
Can I assume that a lot of the songs that you write then start off in that setting where it's just you and an acoustic guitar or something?
A lot of the songs on this record, for sure. Historically too, a lot of the stuff that I've written, has been um, me alone in a room writing to like a beat,
Mm,
or an instrumental loop that either the band has made, or I've gotten from a friend or another producer, or um, if there's or I'm in a room with a couple other songwriters, and we're just kind of come up with some stuff from
sure.
scratch. But generally, the stuff that comes out on our records is stuff that I've written alone, and then I bring it to the band, and then we all work on it together, on the production together. And sometimes then I'll have some tweaks, vocally or lyrically, and I'll get the guys' input on that. Um, I'm not too precious when it comes to my lyrics or melodies, but yeah, generally it starts off with just me.
What was it like then for you to present Follow the Sound of My Voice to your brother?
It was very awkward. How else could it be? I mean,
Sure.
it's such an awkward thing to have written this song that was so personal. Also, my brother, I'm like a heart on my sleeve guy. I'm so emotional, and nobody else in my band is like that. They're all just like steel traps of emotion. They don't ever they're not feelings guys, and I'm
More
such a
stoic.
feelings guy. Yeah, so I played the song for Casey, and he was like, "Cool, man." That was that was the extent of it, and it's a funny thing too, because we've talked about it more, he and I, and he was like, "Well, it's funny because you think it's a song that you wrote about me, but it's really a song that you wrote about you and your kind of version of what it was like growing up with me." Um, and and that was a very funny thing to hear him say, because it's totally true. Totally true. The song is my experience of being his brother. As much as I tried to just like tell objectively his story and our story, it's still my story, you know.
Sure.
And I think that's what always was the most uncomfortable thing for me, when it came to my brother, is I never wanted to make it about me, because I grew up with this knowledge that my brother was always going through something that was something I would never understand, and I think obviously this is not a fair thing to do to yourself, but I always kind of thought like, oh, his problems are way worse than my problems. His problems are always harder than my problems, so why should I complain about anything? Or what does my perspective matter when his perspective is so unique and so
Mhm.
important, so much more important. Um, and that obviously that's on no one but myself.
Sure.
Um, so writing that song was very difficult for me, but it's also a very simple song. I love him a lot, and it's a song about that devotion and that love. So when it boils down to it, it's not complicated.
No,
As
but
complicated as it may be in my head.
sure, but I think it's a beautiful sentiment, and especially kind of coming full circle with some of the things that we talked about, being able to go on this journey alongside your brother. It's not just you and some friends. There is a difference when it's your
Yeah,
brother next to you, and
yeah,
enjoying these successes, and also thinking about where you came from together
yeah,
growing up, and all the things that you had to. All the obstacles you had to overcome to get where you are. I think that's such a beautiful story, and that song to me at least sounds kind of like this tribute to that.
yeah, yeah. It really felt like it when I wrote it. I was like, oh man, I finally got it. I had been wanting to write a song that told our story in a way that felt very real or authentic to me, and I feel like that's the closest I've come to it so far.
Yeah, it's a beautiful song. So well done. Well done you.
Thank you.
Um Final question. You mentioned kind of this, you were looking towards wanting to write a little bit more sparsely, a little bit more yeah, in this new way. How do you see the future of the band? Because you do so much as a group. You do so much different kinds of music. You do movie soundtracks. You work with all kinds of artists from hip hop to whatever. So how do you? Is it still wide open the way you see your own musical kind of creativity?
More so now than ever before. I really feel like for the first time, it's I really have no idea what's next. Like normally we try to be like one step ahead. We've tried to be one step ahead all the whole time. Always like when we're putting a record out, we have another one, ready to go. or that we're already working on. And we have some stuff right now, but I think right now it's I like living in this discomfort of not really
Mm,
knowing what's going to come next, and I think that's okay for the first time in my life. I'm okay with that.
that's awesome to hear. Sam, may I thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do that. I really
Thank
appreciate
you
you.
so much. Enjoy Montreal and the rest of the tour, and best of luck. Can I assume Casey's now with you guys?
Yes, he's back with
Okay,
us. Yeah,
that's awesome. What was it weird
yeah.
being on stage without him?
Oh, so weird. So much better having him back with us.
Awesome. Well, Sam, enjoy your day.
All right, man.